Thank you guys so much for tuning in. In this video, I will be exploring the relationship between cattle and some of our most important resources, land and water. This pairs with my previous video concerning climate change. As a reference, cattle is predominantly cows, so this information largely leaves out chicken, pork, lamb, or otherwise. So water, let's start with water. Water is a source of contention and struggle in today's society, as access to clean water becomes increasingly limited. According to the World Health Organization, about 11% of the world's population does not have access to clean water, or about 785 million people. Another 1 in 3 people lack access to consistently clean water. That number is expected to jump to 1 in 2 by 2025. This isn't just in underdeveloped nations. In America alone, 2 million people lack clean water, and that number is expanding. So let's look at how much water cattle are consuming. The human population as a whole consumes 5.2 billion gallons of water per day. Cows, and just cows, on the other hand, consume 45 billion gallons. Almost 9 times human consumption. Mind, this is fresh water. Water that could be going to the 11% of the population that doesn't have access to clean water. In the US, 55% of all fresh water is going to cattle, while 2 million people in this country are suffering severe health implications from drinking dirty water. To put this a little bit more into perspective, a quarter-pound burger, or a regular size, takes 660 gallons of water to produce, equivalent to showering for almost 2 months. So imagine having to decide between a burger or showering for 2 months. On top of consuming water, fecal matter from cows is responsible for the acidification of freshwater streams and underground reservoirs. So not only are cattle consuming 9 times as much water as we are, they're contributing to the drying up of water sources and acidification of the water we do have left. This calls into question what would happen if we just stopped eating cattle. Before I answer that, let's look at land use. Right off the bat, cattle themselves use 60% of the Earth's arable land. That includes grazing area and land used to raise their grain and feed. Meanwhile, cattle are only responsible for 2% of the world's calorie consumption. This makes you wonder, what could we do with that land? Leading off of land, let's talk about the Amazon. This rainforest is key to our survival, absorbing carbon dioxide, housing tribes, and providing much of our medicines, among other things. The loss of the Amazon would be absolutely disastrous for humanity. Unfortunately, the Amazon is being cut down at a rate of 1 football field every second, 91% of which is directly caused by cattle. The forest is cut down to raise them and to grow their feed. In fact, Layla Salazar-Lopez, program director for Amazon Watch, estimated that the Amazon could be completely gone within 10 years. This is a reality we can't afford to consider. So what about food? Humans consume 21 billion pounds of food per year, while cattle alone consume 135 billion pounds. Meanwhile, 10% of the world suffers from malnutrition. 1 in 7 kids in the United States alone struggle with hunger. We are struggling to feed a global population while cattle are consuming 6 times as much food as us and taking up land that could be used to grow fruits, vegetables, and grains and house people. In fact, most scientists agree that we could feed the entire global population if we cut out meat. In most countries that are raising cattle, that cattle goes to the Western world, and those countries are left suffering from starvation and malnutrition. The way we are eating and what we are eating is not sustainable. With a growing population, it is impossible to sustain current meat consumption. We would have to take up more land, use more water, and more food that we do not have. It is theorized that with current eating patterns, we may suffer from a global food shortage by 2050. The health of our planet, and thus of ourselves, hangs in the balance, and we have full control over maintaining that balance. The good news is that there's a lot we can do to solve these inequalities, some of which I will be explaining in a later video. Below, I provided resources that I used and other places where you can start your own research. In the next video, I will be discussing the role of government and suppressing environmental organizations. When I first began my research, I genuinely believed that such influence was the stuff of conspiracy theories. But the truth is that the government has a heavy hand in the affairs of environmentalists. See you there!